are you waiting for? It's such a great question, and it has so many practical applications. For example, when I ask my son to take the trash out, and he says, "Sure, Mom," and then he doesn't get off the couch, I say something like, "Dude, what are you waiting for?" Or when my cat has been staring at the back door for 20 minutes, and I finally go open the door, and she merely looks up at me, I say, "What are you waiting for, an engraved invitation?" Or like when you're at a mall or an amusement park and you come across a long line of people. Such a long line that you don't know what's at the front of the line. But it might be something worth getting in the line for. So you say, "Hey, what are you guys waiting for?" And occasionally in our lives, when we are contemplating making a big decision, maybe about a move or a new job, someone who loves us very much will say to us, "Well, what are you waiting for?" Such a useful question. It can convey sarcasm or annoyance. It can provide valuable information. And it can push us to step out of our comfort zone to what God has in store for us next. And this is the question that Advent asks of us. What are you waiting for? And I will admit that for a long, long time, I did not understand this season of Advent, this season of waiting. 12 years of Catholic school, and I still didn't understand why we were waiting for something that had already happened. Sure, we were waiting for Christmas Day and getting to open presents and spending time with my cousins that I didn't get to see very often. And there would be treats and toys, and there would be time off of school. But even as a child, those seemed very trivial to me. I didn't understand why we had this whole season with its own color and candles and even an Advent calendar on the wall, just to wait for something that had already happened. In today's gospel, John asks a question. John is in prison and he sends his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we wait for another?" And I find the question incredibly strange. First of all, it seems like John should know who Jesus is. Earlier in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus goes to John to be baptized. And John protests, "No, you should baptize me." And even when Jesus insists, and John baptizes him, John is there to see the Holy Spirit descend upon Jesus like a dove. He hears God's voice say, "This is my beloved Son." The evidence would suggest that John already knows who Jesus is. And the question is so strangely constructed. Are you the one who is to come? John asks of someone who is already there. I can't know why John asked that question or why the gospel writer chose to include it. But I have to say that I absolutely love Jesus' answer. Jesus says, "Go and tell John what you see and hear. The blind can see, the lame can walk, the lepers are cleansed, The deaf can hear. The dead are brought back to life. And good news is brought to the poor. I love this answer so much because it is absolutely not at all what anybody would have expected the Messiah to say. The Messiah was supposed to be a warrior and a king. The Messiah was supposed to come and overthrow Roman rule so that the land of Israel could be restored to the chosen people. The Messiah was to sit on the throne of King David. But Jesus does not tell John's disciples about the great army that he is assembling and training. He does not tell them about his military strategy that he is developing. Jesus tells John's disciples that the signs of the Messiah are about healing and wholeness and restoration that is brought to the sick and the outcast and the marginalized. The signs of the Messiah are not about wars. They are not about political power. They are not about winning. The signs of the Messiah are about wholeness and healing and restoration. Jesus constantly reminds us that he is not who we expect him to be. Jesus is not a warrior. He is not a political king. Jesus does not care about power or prestige or wealth. Jesus, the Messiah, is unexpected. Jesus, the Messiah, is unpredictable. And Jesus will come again. Jesus promised us that he will come again, and we don't know when. The early Christians, the followers of the way, as they were known, were anxiously awaiting Jesus' return. They were always watching and waiting for Jesus to come back. They believed that any day Jesus would descend from the heavens. A few weeks ago in our lectionary cycle, we read a bit of the letter that Paul wrote to the Thessalonians. And in it, he scolds them because a number of them are so sure that Jesus is going to return right away that they've stopped working. And Paul has to remind them that everyone in the community still needs to eat while they're waiting. They were watching and waiting for Jesus to return. But what about us? When was the last time you seriously spent any of your mental energy thinking about Jesus' return? When was the last time you made a life-changing decision keeping in mind that Jesus could come back any day? How often do you scan the sky looking for Jesus descending from the clouds? I don't do that. I don't think about when Jesus is going to return. But Jesus promised us that he would come again. And Jesus promised that when he came again, he would make creation new. Jesus promised us that when he came again, he would make creation new. Think about that in the context of the answer that Jesus gave to John. The blind can see, the lame can walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf can hear. Good news is brought to the poor. Imagine that on a global scale. Imagine that all people are fed, that all people are made well, that all people who are held in any kind of captivity are set free. Imagine a world in which borders and race and religion and socioeconomic status and sexual orientation doesn't divide us. Imagine a world in which we are healed and whole and brought into right relationship with God. That is what we are waiting for in the season of Advent. In the season of Advent, we wait in hope that Jesus will return and that Jesus will restore this broken world to wholeness. And so in this season of Advent, I will ask you that very versatile question in two ways. One, what are you waiting for? What do you hope that the world will look like when Jesus returns? What does wholeness and healing and restoration in unity with God look like for you? And second, what are you waiting for? The world is broken and it's messed up and people are hungry and sick. Surely, you, in even a small way, can begin to bring that healing and that wholeness to the world. Paul tells us that we should wait patiently for Jesus to return, but Paul does not tell us to be idle while we are doing it. You can bring the light of Christ to the world. You can share with the world the one who was and who is to come. Amen.